You ever wonder what happens if you dump apples into a whiskey mash? Well, the liquor fairy did.
I just said, yes, man, right away, anything.
Alright, so today we're going to be making apple whiskey, or as I like to call it, Graf whiskey. If you don't know what Graf is, it's a fictional beverage in the Stephen King universe of The Dark Tower. It's basically a beer and hard cider hybrid. There's no specific recipe, but I have brewed some and it was frickin' delicious. If you haven't seen the video, I'm going to put it right up here for you to check out. I've been wondering for a long time what would happen if you basically made it without hops and turned it into a whiskey. And also the liquor fairy wondered that as well, so that's what we're doing today. I happen to have a shit ton of malt that I can't use on anything. I was contemplating throwing it out, but I've had it sitting in the garage for about 6 months because I couldn't bear to throw it out. I malted some of my own grain, and then I got called out of town for some family stuff. It was basically done when I left town, but it kept germinating for 3 more days while I was gone. And so what I got back was this horribly matted, well over modified, overgrown, just completely gnarled together bed of malt. I wasn't sure what to do with it, so I went ahead and dried it and just kept it. It has all the roots and shoots still on it. This is going to be a dirty recipe, but if you want to try this one at home, use whatever you want. That's the great thing about Graf, is you can use whatever whiskey bill you want, any sort of grain bill. So we've got 7 pounds of this over modified malt. We've got 5.5 pounds of that same malt that I toasted to about a biscuit malt, 6 pounds of apples, and I'm gonna round it out with 3 pounds of corn. And then I've got 5 gallons of apple juice. So this is gonna be a bigger batch, about 10 gallons. Here's the thing, I'm gonna leave this up to your interpretation. If you wanna use Pilsner malt, if you wanna use a Vienna malt or Munich malt, or if you wanna do something cool like basically use the grain bill for a porter, I think that could be really good. You're gonna get a lot of cool flavors out of that. So let's get started. First things first, gotta grind the grain. I forgot how much grinding corn sucks. I know, you guys are gonna be like, why don't you hook a drill up to it? Because my drill's dead. We're gonna get the corn gelatinized in a pot of 1.5 gallons of water. While the rest of the mash water is heating up, we're gonna go with a total water volume of 6.5 gallons, because we're gonna lose about 1.5 gallons to absorption. So I'm gonna use some high temperature enzymes to help me gelatinize the corn, get it broken down. And then we're just gonna add it into our barley mash. So while this is gelatinizing, I'm gonna go grind some barley. So I've got 6.5 gallons of water in my pot at 155 degrees. So you just dough in all of your grain and let that mash for at least 90 minutes. So once your mashing is complete, go ahead and cool your wort down. Honestly, I just let mine cool overnight on the stove. It was midnight and I didn't feel like messing with it, so that's what I did. So I chose to ferment this one on the grain, but I'm doing it the easy way, and I'm just leaving the grain bag inside the fermenter so that I don't have to strain it again. As an added flavor bonus, I'm throwing in 5 pounds of chopped apples, and I'm just throwing them straight into the grain bag so that they don't clutter up my brew. And then add 5 gallons, or roughly 20 liters of apple juice to the wort. Once you get that all together, throw in your yeast nutrient and your yeast. I'm just using Distiller's Active Dry Yeast, and let that go. Now here's the thing. This stuff fermented in 36 hours. No joke. The yeast rocketed through that sugar. So that was pretty cool. Wherever you're fermenting this, it's gonna smell fantastic. It just smells like apple beer. You know, you've got that malt and you've got the apples going, and having the fresh apples in there I think really kind of gave it a boost. So once that was done, I just had to siphon everything out and strain the bag, and then summon the Liquor Fairy. Speaking of the Liquor Fairy, I just want to thank today's sponsor, the Liquor Fairy. If you want to support the channel and you like cool t-shirts and you like flaunting the fact that you may or may not be day drinking at that meeting at the office, go ahead and check out the little panel right down below the video description to see all the products that I've got in my spring store. If you buy some, then guess what? You're now in the club. You could summon the Liquor Fairy too. So all you do is you just put your shirt on and then you rub your nipples, or you take the coffee cup and you rub his nipples. One other thing that I forgot to mention is that I took all the apples and the grain, not all of it, I wish I could have used all of it. The Liquor Fairy brought me the thumper, so I packed a ton of that apple and grain mash into the thumper so that I could extract some of the alcohol and get the flavor. Since I'd let that drain, you could put a little bit more of that inside your thumper than you normally would if you were using a liquid. I wasn't really worried about the volume being taken up in the thumper, because all that mass is going to help the thumper to retain its heat and to not fill up with liquid. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you're not using a thumper and this is kind of irrelevant information to you. Let's move on. Okay, so what I got back from the Liquor Fairy is, quite frankly, delicious. Here is the Heads Hearts transition, and it's just like apple brandy. Apple brandy, and there's some kind of a baked good underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and combine this jar and all the hearts, and then maybe we'll make some decisions on a little bit of the tails. So I've got this all mixed together. Before I proof it down just a little bit and do a tasting, I just wanted to thank all of my Patreon supporters, all of you guys down here, because you're absolutely amazing. You keep giving me tons of ideas. All of you guys voted on what I should do to fill these guys. We're going to talk about that more later, everybody else. And this is one of the things that you guys voted on. This is actually, by a huge margin, Graf whiskey was what you guys wanted to see in the oak barrel. So that is what we're going to do today, and I am crazy excited. And honestly, I wouldn't have all these ideas if it wasn't for you guys constantly pushing me to try new things. So thank you so much. And again, you guys are keeping the lights on. Oh, one other thing. To one of my patrons, Lunchbox, he suggested that I save some of the yeast trub at the bottom of a flavorful brew, whatever that happened to be, and try making a sourdough bread. So I saved some of the yeast from this apple whiskey, because honestly I think that might be an awesome flavor. Even though it's just mostly commercial DADY yeast, there's still wild yeast and wild bacteria on the malt and the apples that were in the brew. So I think this might be interesting. We're gonna make some sourdough out of this at some point. That's gonna happen. Thanks, Lunchbox. All right, so we're currently sitting at 68% ABV. I think I'm gonna knock this down to about 52 to 55% before we throw it in a barrel. All right, so now I've got this proof down to about 52%. We're gonna try a little taste of it. And on the nose, a lot of apple, but also some like figs. There's as far as the grain, the malt, I'm getting kind of a baked good. Like there's some honey in here and some, it's like baklava, which is kind of awesome. Yeah, it's like apple and fig and dessert, some kind of baklava. This is really fantastic. Honestly, I think you should definitely do this. It's got more body, more character than a straight apple brandy. At least the apple brandy I made from store-bought juice. Yeah, this is awesome. So, what are we gonna do with this? So, you know, for the most part, when I do aging on any spirit or wine or beer or whatever, I use stuff from barrel char. But recently, I got a couple of these from 1030 Barrels. What they are is a white oak top on a steel can with a little stopper in the end. Now this one actually came from an old wine barrel, so it was previously used to store wine. And this one is just straight charred white oak. And so this is the one that we're going to use today. Now 1030 is not a sponsor of the channel. He just sent them to me to try them out. Now here's the thing. These don't age like you would age in a jar. It's not a couple of weeks or a couple of months or whatever. You're talking a year, maybe two, because the way these things are done is this is the only aging surface. And the other cool thing is it allows the oxygen transfer to breathe through, so you get that actual barrel aging. It's not like a jar at all. And these are based on the Bad Motivator barrels. If you don't know who Bad Motivator is, I'm going to put a link right here to his channel. Bad Motivator is kind of a hero on homedistiller.org because he came up with these barrels and just published the information freely on the homedistiller.org forum, but also on his website and also on his YouTube channel. He shows you how to make them. If you want to buy them, then you can. But if you want to make them and you have the tools to do it, then you can make them. And the 1030 barrels use a similar design, and the good thing about these guys is that they are for smaller volumes. This is about 750 mils, and this one is like 8 liters. So I don't have 8 liters. So the apple whiskey is going to go in this guy, not in this guy. I have 2 of these and 2 of these, so I have some plans to fill these guys. That is going to be for another episode in the future, and a very, very large ferment. If you get these in the mail and you are not ready to use them, you can put in some Everclear or some water. The reason why you want to do that is to keep the barrel stave tight and leak proof in the in this steel head, because it's actually press fit into the steel head. So adding some water is going to keep that wood swollen up so that it keeps pressing together and it doesn't end up developing leaks. These have currently all been sitting with a little bit of water in them, just about an inch or so, and you know, I just park them like this upside down. They've been sitting for a couple of months because I just haven't been able to get to them yet. Water's good because it's not going to strip out a whole bunch of flavor. It will strip out some, but not enough to worry about. But again, let me reiterate that these age slow because the surface area to volume ratio, the surface area of the wood to the volume of liquid, is basically the same as a 53-gallon barrel. So the amount of time it takes for you to age something in this is going to be like a giant rickhouse at a huge distillery where they have the giant barrels. Couple of years. So consequently, for a YouTube channel, that presents some logistical problems as far as giving a big reveal of how it came out. So I'll see you in about a year on this. So let's go ahead and get this filled up. So this is completely and totally my Patreon's idea to do apple whiskey in this barrel. And if you're interested in the 1030 barrels, I'll put a link down in the video description for you to check them out. And also go ahead and put a link down there for Bad Motivator barrels if you do larger batches, because there's some bad motivators.
I'll tell you another bad motivator, look!
Thanks, Bad Motivator and 1030. Can't wait to try the finished products in a year or two. So I still have a liter of the apple whiskey to age in other ways, so I may go ahead and do a side-by-side of charred white oak and this, and that way when we taste it in a year's time, we'll get a real comparison of like how things age against each other. This other barrel from 1030, it's an old wine barrel. I happen to have just enough of my red, white, and blue whiskey that I made back in July for the 4th of July to go in this one, because a red wine aged bourbon sounds pretty dope. So we're gonna go ahead and get this guy filled up. All right, so now we got these guys filled up. and they're just gonna sit there and do their thing. All right, so apple whiskey. This one is definitely worth your time. I highly recommend you give it a try. If you do, or if you already have, let me know down in the comments, because I'd love to get some different ideas on future recipes for stuff like this. And that way any other viewers who are also contemplating doing this will have some other inspiration down in the comment. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, if you learned anything. If you haven't subscribed, but you enjoy this kind of content, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon right next to it so that you can get notified when I post new content. All right, thanks for watching. Talk to you later.